Isn't it rather curious that out of all the nothing which is your past, there you are? And isn't it still more curious that despite all our reasonable modernity, we go on treating death as some unspeakable calamity, as if it was something unnatural, some dreadful accident, when in truth it is perhaps the most natural thing there is. But you see, we have been conditioned, rubbed into us in every conceivable way, to believe that dying is a kind of failure. That one ought to survive, go on and on and on, as though life was some sort of marathon. But who said you were supposed to survive? It is only in our forgetting of death that we begin to fear it. Now, I've always been fascinated by the idea not merely of dying, but of what it would be like to go to sleep and never wake up. Not darkness, no, not even stillness, but nothing at all. And that nothing, strangely, is not terrifying. It is the same nothing from which you came. For before you were born, there was no you, and yet, here you are. You see? So perhaps, just perhaps, what we call death, what we so dread, is merely the back of the mirror. And if you look closely enough, you may find it's no tragedy at all. But the very key to understanding what this whole business of living is really about. You see, there really isn't anything radically wrong with being sick or with dying. That is to say, whoever gave you the notion that you were supposed to survive, that you were to be here forever, as some permanent fixture in the universe? We live under this curious delusion that it's somehow a virtue to go on and on and on, as if continuity in and of itself were meaningful. But look around. Nothing in nature survives indefinitely. The leaves fall, the stars burn out, even the mountains crumble. And it is precisely because things end that the whole dance can go on. Why else would we have children? Why else should a tree bear fruit? It is nature's way of passing the torch, of saying, you needn't carry this forever. For it is far more amusing, far more lively, for life to carry on through a succession of forms, rather than always through the same one. Each child is the world renewed, and when you see through a child's eyes, the most ordinary things are marvelous. The scratches on the floor hold magic because they are not yet seen in terms of utility, of survival and profit. But when all things are reduced to value, usefulness, purpose, when we cease to see the magic we have, as it were, played our part, nature has no more use for us. We are no longer aware of itself, and so we die. This isn't something to mourn. It is the game. The falling leaf feeds the soil. The rotting branch becomes humus. Out of the death of one form springs the life of another. It is not a failure to die. It is simply time for something else to be born. We live in a culture, particularly this Western modern industrial sort of culture, where it has been impressed upon us in every possible way that death is a disaster. It is regarded as a failure, as if someone has made a dreadful mistake, and so we cover it up. We hush it away. We hide it in hospitals, behind white sheets and sterile corridors. Death is pushed out of sight, like some indecent thing we must not speak of in polite conversation. And this has become one of the great problems in medicine, that when someone is dying, the family conspires with the doctor to hide it, to say, don't tell her, don't tell him, it might upset them, as though not knowing would somehow make it all go away. And so the dying are left in silence, drugged, unprepared, untouched by the final grace of the thing itself. But you see, death when fully met can be an awakening. For when one is in an absolutely extreme situation, and one accepts it, there is the potential for a natural Satori, a sudden seed. I have known men who, in the war, heard the whistle of a bomb coming straight for them, and in that moment surrendered entirely. No resistance, no bargaining, just the clear recognition, this is it. And in that moment, curious, everything became perfectly clear. There was no longer a speck of dust out of place. One sees in that instant what all this is about. And sometimes the bomb was a dud, and they lived, but they never forgot that clarity. And so death becomes not a horror but an opportunity, not a tragedy, but a letting go so complete that what remains is freedom. But we have missed it, because we have pushed it away, hidden it, made it indecent, and in doing so we have robbed it of its meaning. The real difficulty with death is not the end of breath or heartbeat. It is that it presents a situation the ego cannot handle. The ego, that social image of oneself, the name, the history, the responsibility, the role is being taught from the very beginning to cling, to fixate, to continue. And death says, no, there is nothing more to be done. And so the ego panics. But here lies the wonder of it all. If, in that moment, one truly surrenders, if one gives up before one dies, something extraordinary can happen. A moment of stillness, where the whole illusion collapses, where the frantic machinery of trying to manage the universe is abandoned, and suddenly clarity. You realize there's nothing to hold on to, and more so than ever was. For in that surrender, there is a glimpse of something quite beyond the ego, not a new idea, not a belief, but a knowing, that everything, every moment, every sound, every breath has always been exactly as it must be. There isn't a speck of dust in the whole cosmos that's out of place, and in that vision, you see that the whole striving was unnecessary. The anxiety, the control, the illusion of separateness, it was all a kind of play. So death, in this sense, is not an enemy. It is a teacher. It is the moment the curtain falls away and the actor steps off the stage not into darkness, but into reality. But we must meet it with eyes open. We must allow it to teach us. And then perhaps we will say, I wouldn't have missed that for the world. Most people, when they think of death, imagine it as some sort of eternal darkness, as if being dead were like being buried alive, a suffocating, endless night. But that, of course, isn't it at all, because we only know darkness by contrast with light. And when there's no one left to experience contrast, there isn't even darkness. There's nothing. Now that may sound terrifying, but pause for a moment. When you go to sleep without dreaming, are you afraid? Do you worry about what it's like to be unconscious? You simply aren't there. There's no watcher, no sufferer, no one left to even say, this is nothing. And if you were to sleep deeply and forever, it wouldn't feel like a black void. It would feel like nothing whatsoever. No time, no space, no thought, no fear, just as before you were born. Before you were born, you didn't exist. There was no problem with that. You weren't lonely, you weren't bored, you weren't worried about anything. There was no you to be troubled. And yet, out of that apparent nothingness, you happened. You see? So if it happened once, it can happen again. If out of nothing you emerged once, why not again? Death is not the permanent end people think it is. It's not a tomb of darkness. It's not an experience at all. It is the absence of experience. And oddly enough, that absence isn't a tragedy. It's only tragic from the standpoint of the ego, which wants desperately to continue. But in the grand play of the universe, to stop is to rest. And to rest is to begin again. Now if, when you are dead, you return to that state from which you came, that is to say, the same state you were in before you were born, then there's nothing at all to fear, because you've already been there. And look, you happened. Before memory, before language, before anything you could call you, there was that same blank, that same silence. And out of it, the stars spun, the earth formed, your parents met, and suddenly there you were, blinking at the ceiling in a cradle. So why should the end be any different than the beginning? You see, death and birth are not two events, but one rhythm, two sides of the same mystery. And what we call death is not a final wall, but the back of the mirror, the other side of being. We do not remember being born, and we shall not remember having died. But the universe remembers. The universe eyes again and again, in infinite forms. And so if it happened once, why shouldn't it happen again? Not you again in the sense of John Smith or Mary Jones, not the personal ego, but the experience of being itself, the flowering of awareness, the sudden, inexplicable I. As you did not choose to be born, you will not choose to die. But the pattern goes on. The seed falls, the flower fades, but life does not stop. It simply changes its mask. And the show goes on. So death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. Life is the dance in between. And both the opening and the closing are parts of the same eternal breath. Let us suppose something rather curious, that the universe, this whole thing, eyes. It becomes aware of itself. Just as a tree apples or a star shines, the universe peoples. And in so doing, it eyes. It looks out through these forms we call I. Now, ordinarily, we use the word I to mean our personality, our name, our history, our particular bundle of memories and expectations. But that is merely a social convenience, a useful fiction. For the image you have of yourself, your ego, isn't you? No more than a photograph is the person it captures. It's an abstraction, a symbol. It does not breathe or pulse or grow. You see, you are not merely your thoughts about yourself. You are not what you think you are. You are what you do. You grow your hair, beat your heart, secrete your glands, circulate your blood, and yet you have no idea how you manage it. It just happens. Just as clouds form or rivers flow, so if we trace this back far enough, we must say, I am not merely this body. This body comes out of the universe in just the same way a wave rises out of the ocean. It is not separate. It is the universe expressing itself in a particular pattern for a little while. And so the true I is not the ego, but the universe eyeing. Each time you are born, it is the universe blinking once more, awakening again in a new disguise. It has eyed through millions before you, and it will eye through millions after. It doesn't remember because memory is tied to form. But the eyeing, the awareness itself, is timeless. And in that sense, when you die, what ends is only the form, not the seeing. Now, what do you mean when you say I? Most people mean their ego, their idea of themselves. That image built up from the stories they've been told, the roles they've played, and the names they've answered to. But you see, that image isn't real. It's a composite, a caricature, a mask. It knows nothing of how you shape your bones or wind your nerves. It has no knowledge of how you grew in your mother's womb, or how you digest your breakfast, or how your fingers heal when cut. And yet, all that is you. You see, you are doing all these things, but you don't know how you're doing them. You are not a puppet being operated by some external force. You are not a mechanism pushed around by a foreign will. The doing and the being are one. So when we ask who is the real I, we must go deeper than personality. For your body is not just in the world, it is of the world. It comes out of it like a wave comes out of the sea. It's the universe acting, the cosmos in motion. Just as an apple tree apples, so the universe peoples. And you are that peopling. So your true I is not separate. It is the entire process, this flowing, this knowing, this eyeing that has no fixed point. And in that recognition, the fear of death begins to dissolve. Because you see, there was never anything to hold on to. No one is indispensable. And yet, no one is truly lost. The drop returns to the ocean, but the ocean remains. So what happens when this body falls away? When the memory vanishes, the name is no longer spoken, and the image dissolves, well, the form goes. The personality, the costume of the play, retires. But the essence, that eyeing, that seeing, that awareness, was never truly yours to keep, because it wasn't yours. It was the universe, looking out for a time through the window, called you. And when the show ends, when this chapter closes, what remains is not silence in the mournful sense, but rest. Like the hush after music, or the pause between thoughts. You return not to avoid, not to darkness or punishment, but to what you were before. And what you were before was not nothing. It was everything. The stars, the wind, the deep pulse of being. And you may say, but I will be no more. But tell me, were you ever really here in the way you imagine? You were always just a ripple on the vast ocean of life, a beautiful, temporary, shimmering crest. And when it passes, does the sea not remain? So yes, the individual vanishes. The wave subsides, but the ocean continues to wave. The awareness that is I arises again and again, not as the same character, but as the same dance. New masks, new names, new wonders. And each one feels just as personal as the last. That is why death is not the end. It is the opening into the next movement of the eternal rhythm. To die, then, is not a failure, but a return, a release, a homecoming. And when it comes, if we've the courage to meet it with open eyes, we may just smile and say, ah, so that's what it was all about.